It was a chilly afternoon, and James Wilson, a single father of 2 young children, walked slowly down the street, weighed down by the burdens of life. His shoes were worn, and his jacket was fraying at the edges. He had been out of work for months, struggling to make ends meet. His hands were trembling, not just from the cold, but from the anxiety of not knowing how he would pay for his rent this month. As he walked past the park, his eyes caught a glimpse of someone he recognized. Barron Trump, the young celebrity, the son of a former president, was sitting on a park bench, surrounded by a few bodyguards. James stopped for a moment, mesmerized by the sight. He had seen Barron on TV and in the news, always surrounded by luxury, fame, and privilege. It seemed like a world so far from his own. But today, something inside James made him take a deep breath and approach. He had nothing to lose. Slowly, he walked closer, and to his surprise, Barron noticed him. Their eyes met. Barron's expression was soft and kind. He gave James a polite nod, signaling him to sit down. James hesitated, but then sat beside him. The silence between them was heavy, filled with the weight of their worlds. "Can I help you?" Barron asked, his voice calm yet genuine. James looked at him, his heart pounding. I just need to talk. I'm struggling, and I don't know where to turn." And for the first time in months, James felt like someone was actually listening. James took a deep breath, trying to steady his emotions. Barron sat quietly, waiting, his face open and understanding. James' throat tightened as he began to speak. "My name is James Wilson," he began, his voice cracking. "I'm a single father. My wife passed away 2 years ago, and since then, I've been doing my best to take care of my 2 kids. But things haven't been easy. I've lost my job, I'm behind on bills, and sometimes I wonder if I'm failing them." He paused, wiping away a tear. Barron didn't interrupt. He just listened, his gaze never leaving James' face. "I try to stay strong for them. I put on a brave face, but inside, I'm falling apart," James continued. "I'm afraid that they'll see me as weak, that they'll think I don't care. I don't want them to feel this way, but every day feels like I'm walking on a tightrope. I don't know how much longer I can keep this up." Barron's eyes softened with empathy, and without saying a word, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a card. "This is for you," he said gently. "Call me if you need anything. I want to help." James stared at the card in disbelief. "But why would you help me?" Barron smiled, his eyes filled with kindness. "Sometimes, the right person just needs to hear you." That night, as James sat in his small, dimly lit living room, the weight of the day pressed down on him harder than ever. He glanced at the card Barron had given him. The bold letters of Barron Trump's name seemed almost unreal in his hand. His mind raced. He knew he had to do something to change his situation, but the thought of reaching out to a person like Barron felt impossible. How could someone like him, someone who had everything, possibly understand the struggle of someone like James? His children, Sarah and Liam, were asleep in the next room. He could hear their soft breathing, and it broke his heart. They deserved better. They deserved a father who wasn't drowning in fear, who could provide for them without worry. Taking a deep breath, James picked up the phone. His fingers hovered over the numbers, trembling slightly. He didn't know what would happen if he called, but he knew that doing nothing wasn't an option anymore. With a final exhale, he dialed the number on the card. The phone rang, and his heart pounded in his chest. Would Barron even answer? What would he say? After a few long rings, the call was answered. "Hello." It was Barron's voice. James could hardly believe it. "I don't know what to say, but I need help. I need a way out of this," James said, his voice barely above a whisper. There was a brief pause on the other end of the line. Then Barron spoke, his voice calm, but with a sense of urgency. "James, don't worry. We'll figure this out. I want to help." And in that moment, James didn't just hear the words. He felt them. Something had shifted. The next day, as the morning sun poured through his small apartment's window, James still couldn't believe what had happened. Barron Trump, the son of a former president, had actually offered to help. A sense of disbelief filled him, and for the first time in a long while, a flicker of hope sparked in his heart. James spent most of the day pacing around, unsure of what to do. Should he take Barron's offer seriously? He had nothing left to lose, and the thought of finally providing for his children without constant worry seemed like a dream he was afraid to wake up from. That afternoon, as he prepared dinner for his kids, his phone rang. It was Barron. "James, I've spoken with my team. We can help you with your rent and get you back on your feet," Barron said, his voice calm and reassuring. Tears welled up in James' eyes. The words felt too good to be true. Barron continued, "But more than that, I want to help you find steady work. You deserve to stand tall again. I'm going to make sure you get the chance." James felt his heart race, as Barron promised to send someone to meet him the next morning. The help was real. This wasn't just a kindness, it was a lifeline. The following morning, James woke early, his mind racing. He couldn't shake the disbelief from his mind. Barron Trump, a name known worldwide, was actually helping him, a complete stranger. James dressed quickly, his mind on the tasks ahead. He couldn't afford to waste any more time. He still had to make breakfast for Sarah and Liam, but his mind was focused on Barron's promise. When he arrived at the park that afternoon, a sleek black car was parked nearby. 2 large bodyguards stood nearby, scanning the area, as if on high alert. James felt his stomach churn at the sight. This was real. This was really happening. Barron approached him with a warm smile, and James almost couldn't believe it. The young man looked just like he did on TV, but now there was something different about him. He wasn't surrounded by the usual glitz and glamour. Today, he was here to help. "I'm glad you came," Barron said. "I know things have been hard for you, but don't worry. We're going to get through this." With that, Barron introduced James to his financial advisor, a friendly man named Peter, who had already begun making calls to arrange the help James needed. James tried to hold back tears, but they fell freely now. He had never experienced kindness like this before. It was overwhelming. Over the next few weeks, things began to change for James. The financial support Barron had promised arrived promptly, covering his overdue rent and providing the stability he so desperately needed. But it wasn't just the money. James was also offered a job opportunity at a local tech company, thanks to Barron's connections. James still couldn't believe it. He had gone from losing hope to seeing his life take a complete turn. Every morning, he woke up with a new sense of purpose. His kids were no longer living in fear of being evicted, and the stress that had once weighed so heavily on his shoulders had started to lift. One afternoon, Barron invited James to lunch at a small cafe. The two of them sat at a quiet table, away from the hustle and bustle. Barron listened intently as James talked about his past struggles, his wife's passing, and the guilt he had carried for not being able to provide for his children. Barron placed his hand on James' shoulder. "You've already done more than most. You've fought for your family every single day. This is just the beginning, James. You're not alone anymore." Those words, simple yet powerful, hit James like a wave. In that moment, he realized that the weight he had been carrying for so long was finally starting to lift. Barron's kindness wasn't just about money. It was about restoring his belief in himself. The days that followed were filled with hope, but also with a sense of fear. James couldn't shake the feeling that he was living in a dream. How could someone like Barron Trump care so much for someone like him? Every morning, James woke up to a renewed sense of purpose, but there was still a lingering anxiety. What if it was all too good to be true? What if Barron and his team lost interest in helping him? But Barron continued to show up, checking in regularly to see how things were going. The financial aid was keeping James afloat, and his new job at the tech company was promising, though he still worried about whether he could meet the expectations. One evening, as James sat at the kitchen table, his daughter, Sarah, approached him. She had been quiet lately, sensing the change in their lives, but not fully understanding it. "Daddy, are we going to be okay?" she asked, her voice trembling. James felt a lump form in his throat. He smiled softly, fighting back tears. "Yes, sweetheart. We're going to be more than okay." In that moment, He realized just how much this new chapter was about more than just financial stability. It was about regaining the family's peace of mind. As the weeks passed, James' life seemed to be improving, but there was still an unshakable fear gnawing at him. He had never been in a position like this before, helped by someone so powerful, so generous. It felt surreal. One rainy evening, while walking home from work, James spotted a familiar black SUV parked across the street. His heart skipped a beat. Barron's guards were standing by, watching the area vigilantly. James' mind raced. Could this be another publicity stunt? A way for Barron to show off his good deeds for the cameras? He hesitated for a moment, feeling a sudden wave of uncertainty. Was he really deserving of this help? Maybe Barron was just doing this to make himself feel better. Maybe, deep down, he was just another charity case. But as he stood there, watching Barron's guards, something shifted inside him. He realized he had been looking at this all wrong. Barron had not just offered help out of obligation. He had extended a hand of compassion. It wasn't about the fame or the attention. It was about two people from different worlds connecting on a human level. Barron's kindness wasn't just about changing his circumstances. It was about changing his outlook on life itself. The next morning, as James sipped his coffee, he received a surprising phone call from Barron. "I'd like to come by and visit you today, if that's okay," Barron said. "I've been hearing a lot about your progress, and I want to see how things are going firsthand." James was taken aback. Barron wanted to visit him. He had already done so much, yet here he was, willing to go even further. "Of course," James replied, his voice shaky. "I'd love for you to come." Later that afternoon, Barron arrived, accompanied by his usual security detail. They parked a few houses down, and Barron made his way toward James' apartment, his bodyguards staying a respectful distance behind. When Barron entered, he looked around with a thoughtful expression. "I see the improvements," he said. "But more than that, I see you trying. That's what matters." James felt overwhelmed by the sight of Barron standing in his modest home. He had expected a quick stop, a handshake, and then goodbye. But Barron stayed, asking about his children, how he was adjusting to his new job, and what other help he could provide. For the first time in months, James allowed himself to believe that this wasn't just luck. It was a real friendship, a bond between two people who had shared something deeply human. The following week, James couldn't shake the impact of Barron's visit. It had been a turning point, one that filled him with both gratitude and a lingering sense of uncertainty. Every day, the reality of his new life felt surreal. It was hard to believe that a random encounter with Barron Trump had set everything in motion. Despite the relief of having his rent covered and a job that promised a future, James found himself questioning his worth. He wasn't used to being helped by anyone, let alone someone with the influence and wealth of Barron. Every time he looked at his children, Sarah and Liam, he thought about how this newfound stability could provide them a better future. But at the same time, a dark thought crept in. Was he just a charity case to Barron? Was this kindness really as pure as it seemed? One evening, while Sarah and Liam played in the living room, James sat quietly at the kitchen table. The weight of his doubts pressed heavily on his chest. But then, a text message from Barron appeared on his phone. "How's everything going? If you need anything, don't hesitate to ask." James smiled through his tears. He realized that Barron didn't see him as a charity case. He saw him as someone who deserved to rise again. The next day, James received an unexpected call from Barron's assistant. "Mr. Trump would like to meet with you again, James," she said, her voice calm but carrying a sense of urgency. "He has a business opportunity that he thinks might be a good fit for you." James nearly dropped the phone. Another meeting. Barron already helped him so much. What more could he possibly want to do? When James arrived at the luxurious office building, Barron greeted him with a warm smile. But this time, Barron didn't sit behind a desk. Instead, he stood, as though eager to present something important. "I've been thinking about you," Barron began, "and I know you've had a tough time. So, I want to offer you something that could change everything." James felt his heart race. What was Barron about to say? "I've been talking to some business contacts, and we have a position that would be perfect for you," Barron continued. "It's a managerial role in a tech startup. It's a big leap, but I know you can handle it." James was speechless. He had been struggling to find a job for months, but this was a career opportunity. "Don't say no just because you're scared," Barron added with a knowing smile. "You deserve to have something great." James couldn't believe what he was hearing. This wasn't just about money. It was about rebuilding his entire future. As the days went on, James wrestled with the weight of Barron's offer. A part of him wanted to leap at the opportunity, but another part of him felt unworthy. How could he, someone who had barely been able to make ends meet, take on such a responsibility? He spent countless nights lying awake, his mind swirling with doubts. Would he be able to succeed in such a demanding role? He had been struggling for so long. Could he truly turn his life around with one opportunity? One evening, as James tucked his children into bed, Sarah looked up at him, her eyes wide with curiosity. "Daddy, what's wrong? You don't seem happy." James paused, his heart heavy with the weight of the world. He smiled gently, brushing her hair away from her face. "I'm just thinking about how I can give you both a better life. I want to make sure you never have to worry about anything." Sarah smiled, her innocence shining through. "You already make me happy, Daddy. You don't have to be perfect." Those words echoed in James' mind. He realized that Sarah and Liam didn't need perfection. They needed his courage, his strength, and his willingness to fight for a better future. The next morning, James made the decision. He would take the job, no matter how afraid he was. For his children, for himself, and for the future Barron had given him the chance to build. James walked into the new office building, his hands clammy, his heart pounding in his chest. The nerves gnawed at him. How had he gone from struggling to make ends meet to walking into a professional office, ready to start a new chapter of his life? He couldn't help but wonder if it was all too much, if he was really cut out for this opportunity Barron had so generously given him. But as he entered the building, he was greeted by Peter, Barron's business associate, who had been in touch with James since Barron made the offer. Peter greeted him warmly, showing him the workspace and introducing him to the team. They were kind, supportive, and eager to get to work. As James settled into his new role, the overwhelming weight of his previous struggles seemed to lift, even if only a little. Still, doubts lingered in the back of his mind. Was he really making a difference? Could he really make it in this new world? That evening, as James walked home, his thoughts were interrupted by a call from Barron. "How's it going?" Barron asked, his voice steady and reassuring. "I know this is a big step. I'm here, if you need anything." James smiled through his tears. For the first time in a long while, he felt like someone truly believed in him. Weeks passed, and James began to settle into his new job. Slowly but surely, the weight of the world on his shoulders seemed to ease. He was no longer the man struggling to pay rent, but someone with a purpose, working towards something bigger than himself. One afternoon, Barron invited James to meet him at a cafe, away from the eyes of the press and public. Barron had always been kind, but this meeting felt different. As James arrived, Barron stood up to greet him, offering a genuine smile. "I know things have been tough for you, James," Barron said as they sat down. "But I've been thinking, there's more I can do for you. You've shown incredible strength, and that's something that deserves recognition." James felt a lump form in his throat. He had already received so much from Barron. What more could there be? "I want to offer you something that goes beyond just work," Barron continued. "I've spoken with a few people in my network. I want you to have access to career mentorship, leadership training, anything you need to not just survive, but thrive." James was speechless. The tears that had been threatening to spill finally fell, and he couldn't help but feel a profound sense of gratitude. "You're not alone in this anymore," Barron said softly. "You've got me, and you've got a chance." Months passed, and with Barron's guidance and the support of his new colleagues, James' life was transformed in ways he never thought possible. He was thriving in his job, and for the first time in years, he felt like he had a real future. His relationship with his children flourished, and Sarah and Liam noticed the change. They no longer saw their father as a man weighed down by worry and stress, but as someone who was actively building a better life for them. One evening, after a particularly rewarding day at work, James sat down with his children. They were in the living room, playing a game, their laughter filling the air. "Daddy, I think we're going to be okay now," Sarah said, her eyes sparkling with joy. James hugged her tightly, fighting back tears. "We're more than okay, sweetheart," he whispered. "We're going to be great." The once crippling weight of fear and doubt had been replaced with hope. James knew he had a long road ahead, but he also knew that with Barron's kindness and his own determination, anything was possible. The love and care he received from Barron had given him more than a job. It had given him his life back. James had come a long way since Barron's initial help. His career was thriving, and his children's laughter filled their small apartment once more. But even with all the changes, something still gnawed at him. The fear of losing it all, of falling back into the dark hole of financial ruin, still lingered in the back of his mind. One afternoon, while James was working late at the office, his phone buzzed. It was a message from Barron. "James, I want you to know how proud I am of you. You've worked hard, and you've earned every bit of this success. But I'm always here, even if you just need someone to talk to." James sat there, staring at the message. He had always been so focused on proving himself, on standing on his own 2 feet, that he hadn't fully realized how much Barron had done for him. It wasn't just the money or the job. It was the unwavering support. Barron had seen something in him that he hadn't seen in himself. Potential, worth, and a future. Tears welled up in James' eyes. He had gone from struggling to even feed his children to standing on the precipice of a better life. And none of it would have been possible without Barron's kindness. As James' life flourished, Barron's own world started to shift. The media had always painted him in one of 2 lights, as the son of a former president with endless wealth and privilege, or as an aloof celebrity. But what few knew was the weight of responsibility Barron carried, how much he genuinely cared about making a positive difference in the world. During a charity event, Barron took a step back, observing the world around him. For the first time, he truly saw the struggles of people like James, the everyday fathers and mothers who gave everything for their families but didn't always have the opportunities they needed to rise above their circumstances. It made him reflect on his own actions and the true value of his influence. That night, Barron sent James a message. "I've been thinking. I want to create a foundation for people like you. I've seen what a difference one act of kindness can make, and I want to do more. Let's make sure no one has to go through what you did alone." James was floored. Barron wasn't just offering a lifeline to him, but to countless others. It was a life-changing realization. Barron's kindness had sparked a fire, and now it was growing into something much bigger than both of them. Months later, Barron's foundation was up and running. James became an ambassador for the organization, using his own story to inspire others. The foundation provided financial assistance, job training, and mentorship to struggling families, offering them a hand when they had nowhere else to turn. As the first event rolled out, James stood before a crowd of individuals and families, many of whom were experiencing the same hardships he once faced. His heart swelled with emotion as he shared his journey, the sleepless nights, the crushing doubts, the moments when he felt like giving up. But none of that mattered now. He was standing in front of them, stronger than ever, a living testament to what kindness and perseverance could achieve. Barron stood beside him, his presence quiet yet powerful, watching as the crowd cheered. It wasn't about fame or recognition. It was about the ripple effect of compassion and the lives that would be transformed because of it. James turned to Barron, his eyes filled with tears. "Thank you," he whispered. "You've changed my life." Barron smiled, placing a hand on his shoulder. We changed each other's lives. As the crowd applauded, James realized that his life wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about thriving, about giving back, and about spreading the same kindness he had received. A message to you, our viewers. If you've made it this far, we hope you're feeling the same emotions James felt throughout his journey. From despair to hope, from fear to strength, this story reminds us all that kindness has the power to change everything. Now, if this story touched your heart, please do us a favor. Like, comment, and subscribe. We want to hear your thoughts. Did this story inspire you? Have you ever experienced a moment of unexpected kindness? Share it with us. Your words can inspire others just like Barron's actions inspired James. Let's keep the cycle of kindness going together. Thank you for watching, and remember, your story isn't over yet. You too can change someone's life.